read it. It's
Okay.
It's from Andrew D, and it's how low is too low for a lowball offer from Andrew D.
Andrew, good question. I think this is probably going to interest a lot of people. That's a good one, Andrew.
Yeah.
But I think what you're looking for is some sort of like percentage. And the reality is that doesn't exist because that's not the proper way of approaching the process, if that makes sense. So here's what I would say. Number one, not every home is priced in conjunction with fair market value. There are plenty of properties that are 10% overpriced, 15% overpriced, 20% overpriced. So if I say 10% as what I would consider to be, anything lower than that is a low ball offer, that would be 10% off of fair market value. But if something's listed for $500,000 and it's worth $450,000 and you offer 10% below that, then you're just offering them what it's worth. So you have to look at each individual property and determine, okay, what's this property actually worth? And of course, that's what the real estate agent does for you. We want to show you the properties that fit your needs. We want to get you, or match your excitement about the property. But we also want to be very diligent in our research to make sure that you're making a wise financial decision. So we see this property, we run the comparables on it, we run our analysis, and we determine what we think this property is worth. So in this example, if it's listed for $500,000, but it's worth $450,000, and we offer them, say, $420,000, if it's worth $450,000 and we offer $420,000, is that a low ball offer? Well, in my opinion, no, that's not a low ball offer. $400,000 would be a low ball offer. But you have to think about it. The sellers think, if, let's say that we offered $420,000, well, $420,000 off of $500,000, that's $80,000. They might consider that to be a low ball offer, but in reality, it's not, because it's not that far off of what that property is worth. So from a buyer's perspective, this is really what you want to do. This is kind of the magic behind this process. And this is going to depend on how long this property has been on the market and how motivated this person is to sell. So both of those pieces of information you should have before you make the offer. Now, you probably might be asking yourselves, well, how do we know how motivated a seller is to sell the property? Well, if you're a real estate agent and you've been doing this for long enough, you know the right questions to ask to kind of uncover that information. Just like the seller wants to know who the buyer is and where they come from and what their story is and do they have a home to sell, and if they walk through it and they like it, are they in a position to buy it, and have they been pre-approved for a mortgage, or are they paying cash? Sellers have all these questions for buyer agents, and this is something that we put people through when they want to see our properties. We want to make sure, we pre-qualify our showings. We want to make sure that if somebody is going to leave their house and clean it up and pack up their kids and their dog and they're put it in the car for an hour and drive around aimlessly, I want to make sure that they're doing that for somebody that has a really good reason for being in that house and that would probably buy it if it checks all their boxes. Not, we're visiting some family and we live in Florida and we're going to be retiring next year, so we just wanted to gain a sense of, what properties looked like in this area. And next year, if we decide to put our home on the market, then at least we'll know this is an area we'd consider, along with Myrtle Beach and Charlotte. And it's just like the quintessential tire kicker that you have just spent all this time letting walk through your house that will not buy it. So obviously, sellers don't want to go through that process, and that's something we make sure doesn't happen. Obviously, no plan is foolproof, but you want, as a buyer, you want to make an offer that's just low enough for them to consider it and respond. If you go too low and they reject it, then you have to figure out how much further up the chain you have to go to solicit that response out of that seller. You don't want to negotiate against yourselves. Now, I realize the irony in saying this, but on the seller side of things, I do not like my sellers to reject offers. And here's why. I don't really care where they start. I just care where they finish. And I have had too many success stories in my career where somebody did make a lowball offer. I had somebody that made I think we had the property listed for like $1.34 million. They offered $1 million. We came off the price $15,000 and the buyer took it. Obviously, in most instances, it's fairly justified for the seller to want to just reject the offer. Be like, come on, don't waste my time. $1 million on a $1.34 million house, that's worth it? No, thank you. Go waste someone else's time. But when we had the conversation and I explained my reasoning and we came back, the buyer took it. I mean, that's an extreme example, but the reality is this. You want to sell the house. The buyer wants to buy the house. Let's get the emotion out of the way. If some people they just can't help it. They just have to make a lowball offer. Maybe it's just so they can like put that notch in their belt and be like, okay, well, now we know. Now we know, because everybody hears these glorified stories of somebody getting a property for a considerable amount off of the asking price. You don't know the dynamics of that transaction. You don't know if that property that they bought for $250 was worth, $260 and they only got a $10,000, bonus in the form of equity, but it was listed for $300. It was way overpriced. I mean, there's so many dynamics that go into that. But in this market, if you find a buyer that wants to buy and a seller that wants to sell, yeah, there might be frankly, a little bit of a stupid decision made on either side of the transaction initially. But if you can get over that, take advantage of that, put yourself in the position of power, and go back to the party and say, hey, you know what? I appreciate you putting together an offer on my house, but I'm not going to sell it for that amount. So here's the deal. I'm going to come down $5,000 just to show you that I'm willing to negotiate, but your next offer better be a good one. Otherwise, I will not spend any more of my time on it. Now, if a seller said that to me and I really wanted to buy that house, I'm not a tire kicker, I'm a real buyer, then I'm going to take that seriously and I'm going to say, okay, all right, you caught me. Let's make a deal. And usually that's the way it goes. But when you let emotion get in the way and you say, that is just absurd. That's ridiculous. No way. Tell them to take a height, pound pavement, pound sand. You don't get anywhere with that. So anyways, hope that answers your question, Andrew.